Nice to see you all, and thank you all for joining me. I'm Amy Gradnik. I lead our Strategic Advisory Solutions team here at HIKE2. In my previous life, I was leading transformations in financial services for the past 20 years or so. So that, of course, included data across finance, technology, risk, compliance, and business lines as well. When I am not working, we all agreed we would do personal introductions on this one. So when I'm not working, my family and I are based in Pittsburgh. I have 4 kids at home, aging 10 to 16, and I am really looking forward to the one that just turned 16, maybe driving, so that we can start sharing some of those responsibilities. He doesn't quite understand that yet, but he will. He will. So I'm going to hand it over, and Amanda's going to go next.
Hi, Amanda. Hello.
Oh, that's okay. Here, we'll share.
Okay. Hello. Oh, there you go. Amanda Hashfield. By the way, when I was done, I did not see the avoiding. I think I was just told I was going to be talking about data disasters. So, let's see. About 5 years ago, I started the Legal Analytics and Metrics program for Intel Corporation. By the time I left, we had, I don't know, dozens of solutions out there, you know, driving data insights and efficiencies. And some of the things that I found really interesting about it is how much value you can add on like the simplest metrics to a group that's never really looked at its data before, and how much impact you can have by pulling data across multiple different systems and sources and putting it in a cohesive story if a group has really only ever looked at it in silos. Prior to that, I've been at Intel pretty much my entire career. I varied functionally. I spent about 2 decades in operations finance, so also financial stuff. I built the compliance organization for US government contracts, and I worked in the strategic roadmap. But honestly, legal operations is what I really loved, both because we have the most interesting problems to solve, and the community is just amazing. It is warm, it is open, it is collaborative. From a personal standpoint, married 24 years. I have 2 college sophomores, and I have 2 cats at home who are really sad that said kids are college sophomores and no longer home playing with them.
Vivienne?
Hi, nice to meet everyone. I'm Vivienne Wei, CEO for Unified Agentforce Platform Apps and Industries Technology team. I've been with Salesforce for about 9 years, started in infrastructure, data center capacity management, working with data scientists to build predictive models to forecast our compute needs before we place millions of dollars of infrastructure compute as well as storage. And then I moved up to a platform and was part of the team that scaled up Data Cloud, which is now called Data 360, and that over time, we also have the apps teams and the industries teams. And I spend a lot of time working with customers around the globe about agentic AI transformation, enterprise transformation. And you know, before I joined Salesforce, I started my career on Wall Street doing investment banking, energy and utilities, as well as real estate. That's kind of what led me into data centers, because if you think about it, it's power, utilities, and real estate. That's the business model. Personally, I have 2 young daughters, so to me, like, bring more women into the space of data and AI is a non-negotiable. It is a personal mission. So that's kind of how I filled my day today. Like, I spend my morning having a executive women data and AI breakfast, sharing some of the best practices and what we're seeing in the market, because I think this is the era where we can make a lot of change for good and for bigger impact, and now is the time.
Thank you. Ariana?
Hi everyone, I'm Ariana Recidoro. I sit on the legal operations team at DocuSign. I've been there now almost 3.5 years, leading our metrics program, and I like to say I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. I also manage a lot of our special projects, which is really all the projects that the other folks on the team can't manage. So I have my toes dipped in about everything right now. Before then, I was at a few other tech companies, kind of a similar story to other legal ops folks. It was not a straight line into legal operations. I was in compliance before. I had a brief stint in business development, and I was not very good at it. And then I ended up in legal operations. Yeah, and it's been really fun at DocuSign. It's quite a small team. I think we've now grown from 3 people to 5. So it's been fun helping grow the programs there too. And then personally, I do not have children, but I have 2 little dogs who are my fur babies. And yeah, in terms of things I like to do, I feel like every season I pick up a new hobby. So this season it might be snowboarding, but we'll see how long it lasts.
I wish you luck, especially snowboarding as an adult. I am a skier. I tried once. I will not try snowboarding again. My kids had more fun laughing at me than I had snowboarding. That's fantastic. So thank you all for sharing some personal tidbits as well. I'm so interested with your varied careers and how each of your careers also had a little bit of a different path into data. So interested for us to kick off on some of the challenges that you've seen within transformations and data transformations. And I'm wondering, Amanda, if you can kick us off.
On data transformations?
Yeah. You had talked to us a little bit about manual data management,
right,
and how that was really challenging for you and what you've seen.
Well, as I said, when I was originally told, I was told it was data disasters, not avoiding them. So the story that I have is around manual data and what to do if you share inaccurate data with your executives, which is one of the things that actually, unfortunately, does happen with more regularity than I would like to say when you don't have your data automated, when you don't have it systematized yet. And my best/worst story with that is actually not from my legal operations. It's back from when I was doing finance, and I was leading the group that had the consolidated financials, and one of the things that we did was the annual planning cycle. And part of the annual planning cycle was figuring out what the budgets were that each group got to be able to spend for the next year. And scary to say that for an, at the time, $50 billion company, we used to run the annual planning cycle on a really, really, really large Excel workbook. And the process to do the spending targets included that the groups would submit what they wanted and why and all of that. And the initial submission was fine. It came in Excel and it was all linked. But then they were working with their executives sort of right up to the last minute when their executives needed to present. And so things would change. And they would send us emails in of all the changes. We would take the emails. We would put the changes in. We would come up with our recommendations aligned with the CFO. CFO would present to the CEO. Targets would come back out. We would send them out. 1 year we're doing all of this. It's great. We've done all of that. We've aligned. The CFO has gone to the CEO. We get the targets back. We send the targets out to the groups. And like 10 minutes later, I get a call from one of my colleagues over in one of the groups asking why their budget was like $10 million less than it was supposed to be. I was like, okay, no problem. I'll go look into that. And I was darn sure that when I looked into it, the answer was going to be, oh, well, because there was this project that we actually recommended that, probably shouldn't be done next year. It wasn't as important as others, and that was the 10 million. And instead, when I looked into it, nope. It was, we had missed an email. And they were right. And they deserved $10 million more, and they had requested a, acceptable variance for what it should be. So once I got over my cold sweat of sitting there staring at this, I then went and talked to my boss about it and basically told her what happened. We gave a bad P&L to the CEO. It was $10 million off. They really did deserve it. And then I committed that as soon as we got that all fixed, I would sit down with the group and we would come up with a process of how we hardened our process and how we made it secure so that this would never happen again. And to me, those are sort of the key things to do if you ever are stuck in that awful place, which is be open, be transparent, own up to it, fix it, get the numbers right as soon as you can, and then go back and figure out how do you actually solve this so it doesn't happen in the future. And hopefully you maybe even solve problems that haven't happened yet. And I do have one other, if I have a moment more, which is there is a fourth one that I think is really, really important. It just didn't happen in that particular story. So I unfortunately have a few stories on this one, but another time we gave bad data to an executive. This one actually was in legal operations. and we had a new CLO who had come in, and my boss wanted to be able to provide metrics to her so that she could understand the organization she just came into, which was great. That was what my team was for. We were excited about this. These were metrics we hadn't done before. So my analyst went and we created them. We pulled the data. We did it all manually initially because we were going to figure out what really spoke to her, and then we would go automate them going forward. Analysts pulled all the data together, had these metrics. We actually had a pretty good process. We had somebody peer reviewing to make sure that all the metrics were good and clean before they went forward. And then like the night before they were due, the numbers changed. There were some financial numbers in there, and we just got a new set of finances, and they changed. And so my analyst was good and re-pulled them and re-ran all of the metrics and the visuals. And the person who was doing the peer review happened to be on vacation that week. And so she then just sent the numbers through, and my boss went and presented them, and about a day or two later, she comes to me and she said, I just realized I put a rock in the numbers when I reran them, and they were wrong. And we did all of the, go fix them, tell the boss, all of that. But the real thing I want to focus on with this one is the very first thing I said to her was, thank you. And thank you for bringing this forward, and you're human. We're all human, and human beings make mistakes, and that's okay, and what are we learning from this, and what are we fixing in order to go forward? And that to me is just so critical, because that changes it from a culture of fear to a culture of safety, and it creates a foundation that people will actually now come to you again if there are problems in the future.
I think that leads really well from a culture perspective, Ariana, into something that we had talked about, which is some of the challenges with spinning up a data program. Can you share what you've seen in that space?
Yeah, so I've been involved on a few teams at DocuSign as well, where we either have very nascent metrics or data programs, or no programs at all. So there's always the trouble of, one, finding what access you have to data, like the hygiene of the data, and then understanding what you can pull from it that would actually be of value to folks leading the team and other executives at the company. Even now, we are going through the exercise, admittedly because we don't really have dedicated formal analytics support, so I'm the analytics support. But yeah, I'm constantly going through the exercise of, okay, what kind of information do we have access to? Are there any trends that are of value that I should share with my manager, with the DGCs, with the CLO? And then from there, trying to understand too, what are actionable steps we should be taking? Is this just information that we should know? Is this a baseline that we should share with leads on the team? Or should we start trying to use this data to make decisions? Kind of going back to a data disaster though, there was a team a few chapters back where we also did not have formal analytics support, and they would tell me all the time, yeah, when we're doing this analysis, it's more of an art than a science. So the way they would manipulate numbers didn't always make sense, but yeah, that was part of my BD experience that I don't really tap into anymore.
Structure, so important. Vivienne, can you share some of your experience, especially since you're working with customers? So I'm sure you're seeing a more broad swath of these challenges in the data space, and maybe how you're addressing those as well.
Yeah, I can start with the internal story we had back when, about 10 years ago, when I first joined Salesforce. We had a data scientist on the team who was building this model called Supernova. And he's like, so a bunch of us would ask, hey, how do you design a model? Does the output make sense, right? Because at the end of the day, it's for business purposes. Predict the compute needs. How many machines are we going to forecast? And we're going to have to put dollars behind it. So what spins out of the model actually matters. And he'd be like, no, this is a black box model. I can't exactly explain to you why. And I'm like, logically speaking, that makes no sense. It's really just multivariate algorithm. Explain what goes into the weighting of the model. What are the different parameters? And then he's like, I don't think I can explain it. Then we're like, okay, when you look at these outputs, does it make sense? If we're gonna be a $30 billion company, do we need that much compute that's gonna cost us like billions of dollars? And he's like, let me go back and take a look at it. Then he goes into the dark space, following with the black box model, and then comes back the next day. We go through this iteration like over time, right? And then I realized like, hey, we can be in this data black box for months, and you always got to come back with like, what is the purpose? Does it make business sense? Kind of going like not only the inside out view, but also the outside in view. And then I think a lot about, hey, in this agentic AI era, people talk about, okay, your data, your agents are only as good as the data that it's grounded on and the context it has. So, a lot of the companies that we work with, they have a lot of data debt. I mean, that's kind of like the common, right? Unless you're like an AI native company that's been created in the last 6 years or 6 months. But even then, there's probably data in enterprise silos. So I think a lot about, hey, what are the use case? What is the value you want to create? And then work backwards. Based on the use case, what are the necessary data that you have to cleanse? So when we rolled out help.salesforce.com, that agent, we're basically feeding a lot of the knowledge articles from the past 26 years. Then we realized, oh, some of those knowledge articles actually aren't relevant anymore. So then we went through that cleansing process, but it was very clear what was the mission of that agent, the specific purpose of the agent, and what is the most important data to like cleanse. So that process helped us, going from data to value to profit, kind of work backwards on the purpose. So that's what we usually guide our teams on. Hey, don't try to go into I was in London recently. You're gonna enjoy this. Somebody was like, hey, don't boil the ocean. Boil just enough water for a cup of tea. That's the British data.
Perfect.
Data lingo.
I think it's perfect, right? We all think about that. How do you maybe start small, but be able to scale? And I think it's a great segue as we talk about how do you then approach these challenges and still be able to make progress. Amanda, I think it would be great on that note to lead into.
Perfect. So that not quite as pithy was basically what my boss told me when I started my job in legal operations of Don't Boil the Ocean, and I love him for it. Because if you're starting an analytics group, or if you're trying to get an organization to become more data-driven, there are going to be so many problems for you to solve. There is going to be so much value for you to be able to drive, and you might be tempted to go and do all of it and go and solve everybody's problems. And I would caution you, I would recommend, don't do that. If you try and do that, you are likely going to spread yourself too thin. You're probably going to take on projects that actually have really, really hard, challenging data issues in them, and maybe ones that you or your team are not yet skilled for. And you're also probably going to start going after projects that have business partners who aren't yet bought in to the whole value statement. So I would recommend, and what worked really well for us is instead find a quick win. Find something out there that you can actually go and deliver in a reasonable amount of time that's going to add value to somebody, and find as part of that an early adopter, a business partner who wants the success of this project as much as you do, who is as excited about it, because then you're going to have somebody who will put their blood, sweat, and tears into making sure it's successful. At the end of the day, you will have a referenceable design, so the next people you go out to try and tell the value you can do, you can show them the value you actually did, and you'll have evangelists. The example I have for this one was e-discovery. team we were working with. This was one of our very early projects. They had years worth of data that they had been getting from their vendors. They had like 3 years worth of data, and they wanted to understand it. And they really wanted to sort of be able to see what were their trends, what were the key things and information that they could get out of it. We're like, great, we can go do that. As we found, because this was data that was submitted over years and manually, it wasn't very clean. There was a lot of real mess in it. And again, because that team was excited about it, really wanted to be able to get this result, they were with us there hand in glove. They were working with their vendors. They had some vendors go and restate 3 years worth of data in order to get it clean. And they were with us through iteration after iteration of trying to narrow in on what were going to be the most beneficial metrics to them. And at the end of the day, then, they were so excited with what they got. They went and presented it to the head of litigation. They were our biggest champions going forward, and they really helped sell our value to the rest of the legal organization.
Vivienne, can you help us as you think through alignment? I love this example from Amanda around how do you deliver a business outcome in a very tactical way to get people aligned. But as you think through alignment at that executive level, how do you get them ready? How do you ready them, especially in this world for agentic AI?
Yeah, we've been guiding our team, our internal teams as well as external customers on, hey, there are a lot of data problems you can solve. There's an ocean of problems. How do you brainstorm, hey, here are the set of use cases, and what are the top use cases? Maybe 2 to 3 use cases that's going to deliver the most amount of impact, whether it's on time saved, right? Really, that's time multiplied, because if you produce more efficiency for your individual teams, that means they have more time to create other new opportunities. Or how does it connect to either the top line or bottom line of the business? So we usually guide through that, and depending on the industry you're in, you look at, okay, you think backwards, what are some of the key KPIs you can identify that's going to move the needle for an agent use case, or even a data use case? I was recently interviewing, I have this podcast called AI Heroes and Headaches, and I interviewed this guy who's a top thinker and practitioner in the data and AI space. He has a book, Vivienne, and he has this book called Data to Profit. He gave me an example that was very, very good. He was like, hey, when I was working with this retailer, they went through a lot of metrics, and then they looked at dollar per square foot to optimize the processes, and then they decided, hey, I'm actually going to unload a lot of the bulky inventory that's occupying a ton of space in the factories, so that it frees up the space for me to get the higher margin products into the inventory to sell. That was a huge unlock from my perspective, because every day we are used to running the business in a specific way. We look at the same set of metrics over and over, but just by having some additional, going above and beyond to think through, hey, how does it move the top line or the bottom line? What is my CFO going to care? Then you think backwards, okay, then from a KPI perspective, what are some of the inputs and outputs that I can change to shape the output? Yeah. That kind of process, I think we don't spend enough time thinking through. And I think about, for data analysts, we're always like thinking, what's the additional report and dashboard that I can create in a scalable, repeatable manner? That's very important, right? People use Tableau and Power BI, build those dashboards, evangelize. But I think that additional, just spend another hour thinking through it yourself. And then, the other power is talk to some of your cross-functional team members, because there's a lot of knowledge. I actually really love your idea, your comment on you're a generalist, because you've had different experiences that
I may not have had. And by having that conversation, you would unlock so much. I've had many conversations, with that data scientist, the supernova modelist, and then also capacity planning operations manager, understanding, hey, supply chain, every single step is actually dollars, right? Because if you make the process more efficient, that translates directly into your bottom line. So do that kind of map of KPIs to dollars, and that's usually what helps you build the business use case. And along the way, if you can bring the cross-functional team together, guess what? These are usually the tribe you need to build to operationalize the projects too.
I think being able to put your thinking cap on and using data to really unlock those insights is so incredibly important versus, you're right, focusing on the report that I have to deliver today. Ariana, I was wondering if you could help us also connect when you're faced with a big vision versus that tactical day-to-day. How do you balance those views and keep everybody on the path to success?
Yeah, I think, sorry. I must have, thank you. Yeah, just kind of chiming off of what Vivienne and Amanda have been saying is just making sure that all the work that you're doing is going towards some sort of goal after prioritizing which goals you want to achieve. Yeah, I will admit, I sometimes feel like our team is trying to boil the entire ocean all at once, especially as we're still building out a lot of these data programs. But I think from a project management perspective, constantly checking in and asking, like, what exactly are we trying to solve here? Like, are we trying to solve and identify a short-term solution? Are we trying to, again, build a report so the team can understand how to strategize headcount planning for the upcoming year? Or are you just trying to understand, like, I don't know, yeah, just a bite-sized piece of this bigger plan that you're trying to create? Yeah, I tend to operate with a project management mindset of just kind of going through a checklist of what exactly are we trying to accomplish? Is this work actually pushing us towards that goal? Are we working out of scope? Is this work still in scope? So yeah, I tend to operate on the tactical side and yeah, just go through a checklist, but I'm constantly trying to ask, like, are we actually solving a problem, or is this additional work that is really of use to no one on the team?
I think that's fantastic, though, because you're looking at that overall strategy, but actually putting it into execution. So being able to say, are we delivering on what we committed, and is it still meeting the vision that was there? And I'm sure being able to flex on that as needed. I think I cut you off.
I was just going to say, one of the things that we found really useful that I think we put in place probably about 6 months into when we started the group was just coming up with what are the value vectors that we can drive, and to be able to then measure the different projects that are coming in. And so, I may not remember all of these correctly, but like the ones we came up with were, what actually is going to drive the needle for the company? What does legal do that actually changes what's going to hit the company? And for us, that was litigation, because you could lose a couple $2 billion there, and IP, because that's what's protecting the X billion dollars of revenue. So those were two really key areas to go after. Oh, also compliance, because you could end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. So those were sort of the three big areas we had there. And then another one we came up with was the let lawyers be lawyers value metric, which is maybe you have groups that already have actually the data they need, and they really know the information, but they have lawyers who are spending their time in Excel. And lawyers really should not be spending their time in Excel. And so were there places we could offload it and we could take that time back from them? And then we had, a few other ones. Some of them went into the, who really wants to work with us, and are there things we could drive our data out into the rest of the organization? But just sort of having those as your North Stars to be able to measure as the tyranny of the urgent projects start coming in.
Fantastic. We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but we will have probably 5 minutes or so for questions, so you can all think about your good questions as we wrap up. First and foremost, of course, thank you all. We're going to do a quick recap of some of the themes that stuck out to us today. I'm going to steal a little bit of what you said because, and I think it's so relevant for today. Yesterday, we did another talk yesterday about legal operations and some innovation there. But one of the pieces and one of the quotes from yesterday was "make work more fun," and I think that goes so much in line with what you just said about letting lawyers be lawyers. And I think there's many use cases across corporations for that, and making sure that people can be very good at their jobs and enjoy what they're doing day in
I just
and
want
day
to point out that she just said lawyers being lawyers is fun.
All right, my version of fun is different than your version of fun. The other point that I would say for today, and the themes that I heard and all of you, and I know just from the conversations that we've had, is resilience. Having resilience in yourself, within your careers, and then of course resilience in your data and being able to know when things aren't right, but being able to fix it. Maybe we just go down the line and you can say something that stuck out to you today around the conversation.
Let's see, stuck out. I liked the theme that sort of came across all of them of sort of how do you add value? That really should always be the piece of whether you're doing it at a strategic level, whether you're doing it at a tactical level, just make sure that whatever you're pulling together, whatever data you're doing, whatever metrics you're providing, really you're thinking about what's the decision it's driving, why are you pulling it together, how are you actually moving the business forward?
I have a couple of things. One of them is actually based on what you were saying. You know, we're used to doing things the same way, and you send out those reports. Sometimes I encourage my teams to stop sending, especially if they tell me, hey, I've been sending those reports, it's a lot of work, it takes me like 2 hours. And I'm like, you know what? Stop sending it. See who screams. I love it. Is it actually providing value? Is it driving action? That's your feedback loop. You could go outside, talk to your stakeholders, or you can stop and see what happens. Right. So that's one way to kind of take a pause, because we all need some space for thinking. And sometimes just because we've been doing something for the last 15 years doesn't mean that's the way forward, because we're in an agentic AI era, and we need to think, adapt, and change. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think a lot about cultural transformation. Data transformation is really a cultural transformation. And in fact, a lot of the data experts, we've been talking about this for like years, right? This AI wave just kind of is a tailwind for the data culture transformation. So speaking of like bringing people together for fun, share some of the best practices on adopting data and driving change with data and AI. And that's what we've seen, this type of change inside our organization. Thousands of engineers coming together and sharing use cases, and there's a different level of vibe, connection that people see, and enlightenment. And I'll give you an example. Sorry, this is the last take, but we launched the AI Thought Lock on a no meeting Thursday. 400 engineers showed up. And then one woman, 3 years out of Berkeley, she had this final slide I will never forget. It says, may the data be with you. And that just brought so much joy and inspiration.
I love it. Thank you. Ariana?
I think for me, one thing that resonated the most is just be really intentional about the work that you're putting into all of this and checking in with your stakeholders, and again, just making sure that it's of value. But one other item I also wanted to introduce was that, especially talking from my experience, if you're trying to build something new, you don't have to do it alone, especially in the legal operations space. And I'm sure there are other fields that have this too. There are so many different resources, so many different meetups and virtual groups where you can just borrow ideas, chat with other folks who have been in your position, and just honestly copy paste or make tweaks to a model that they already are running, and that has proven success. I will admit I've made the mistake of trying to build something completely from scratch to find out that someone else is doing it and probably doing it way better and way faster. And that's because I took on the work of thinking like, oh, I can do this myself. I have to do this myself. I have to prove things to everyone around me. But there's also nothing wrong with, just mind sharing with your peers, especially within legal operations. I find that especially the women in the space are so willing to be mentors. There's no need to gatekeep secrets. Like, we're all trying to work together to make things easier for one another. So just don't hesitate to tap into resources that, especially if you already have access to them.
I love that. Create your tribe, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Can I have
Please.
one thought that ties into sort of what both of you are saying of the stop doing the reports and there's a community out there, which is, especially if you're managing a team, but even if not, even if you're just working with people, give people the space to vent and complain, because that's where I found, I had an employee who was doing this twice a quarter report. It went up to the CLO. I mean, it was reviewed. We knew that people looked at it and everything, but she was talking about how hard it was of the data she had to transform from the dashboard we already had. And my view was, well, why? I mean, yes, so the dashboard we have is like 90% of what they wanted. Just put that out there and see if it's good enough. If it's not, they'll let you know. But this was taking her like days to be able to go and do. And just literally, I mean, she hadn't been asking me for a solution. She hadn't been even thinking she could do anything else. She was just complaining. And if you create a safe space that people feel like they can vent, that they can bring their problems forward, you then can do just stop doing it. Because sometimes they're too down in the weeds to actually be able to think that themselves.
That's a great point. All right, anyone have any questions?